Welcome to the Women in the Arena podcast, a platform dedicated to honoring America's women veterans who dare greatly in all aspects of life. I'm your host, Sarah Scully. At Women in the Arena, we harness the power of storytelling to illuminate the human experience. Through authentic narratives, we honor the resilience, authenticity, and leadership of women who have served our country. Our name, Women in the Arena, pays homage to Theodore Roosevelt's legendary speech, The Man in the Arena, recognizing the remarkable contributions of women in traditionally male-dominated domains. Today we have the honor of highlighting the extraordinary journey of Command Sergeant Major JoAnn Naumann, who now serves as the Command Sergeant Major of United States Army Special Operations Command, where she is responsible for approximately 36,000 people across 80 countries. Join us as she shares her inspiring journey of 28 years in military service, offering insights into leadership and maintaining wellness amidst the challenges of a demanding career. She is a true woman in the arena, and we can't wait for you to hear her story. Stay tuned. Sergeant Major Naumann, welcome to the Woman in the Arena podcast. We're so excited that you're here. You are a very busy woman, so carving out time to contribute to this is just truly appreciated. And I have to also brag on the fact that the way we got connected, I basically ghost emailed you on LinkedIn and said, hey, I'm starting this thing. It doesn't quite exist yet, but you're exactly the type of person that I think should be on it and whose story should be shared. And I think you got back to me in 30 minutes and said, absolutely, I want to support. And you've been just so amazing and so agreeable through the whole process. And I know that you're putting out hundreds of fires every day. And so I would just want to say that I appreciate you being here and supporting getting this off the ground.
I am excited to share a little bit of my story and hopefully some of the great things that we're doing at USASOC as well.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning and tell me about your childhood and what first inspired you to join the military.
Yeah, so the military wasn't a plan. I wanted to be in the Foreign Service. Like literally when I'm in third grade and everybody wants to be a firefighter or an astronaut, because those are cool things to do, I wanted to be Secretary of State. James A. Baker III, who was Reagan's Secretary of State, was like my idol. That's what I wanted to do. And I stuck with that all through college. And then I realized, like as a, just about to graduate college student, that it's one, very hard to get into the Foreign Service right out of undergraduate. And if you do manage to pull it off, you're probably like going to go stamp passports in Africa. And so I kind of started looking at like, well, what can I do to improve my chances of getting a job that I want to do in the State Department? And I'd studied German in high school and college. I had studied a little bit of French, a little bit of Latin. But these are kind of like, if American speaks a foreign language, these are probably the languages they speak. And so I found out, one, that you actually get government hiring preference if you've served in the military. I found out you can get a clearance in the military, which you need a clearance to get into an embassy. So having that clearance already helps. And then I started thinking about languages and like, okay, well, what language could I learn that would be like something that very few other people would have? And I looked at like, okay, well, maybe I'll do like Chinese or Japanese. And then I realized, well, like they only speak those languages in China and Japan. And, and I didn't want to do like Spanish or something because, again, that's like a fairly common language. Russian, this is in the mid-90s, so it's like, well, Russian is kind of on a downhill slope, right? Because the wall had fallen and the Soviet Union had broken up, and so it's like, maybe Russian isn't the way to go. And then I looked at Arabic, and I'm like, oh, they speak Arabic all across the Middle East. They speak Arabic across a lot of Africa. There are Muslims like all over the world who speak Arabic. There's a huge Arab diaspora in Europe. Like there's a ton of places I could go if I speak Arabic. So I decided I was going to enlist in the Air Force to learn Arabic. So I go to the Air Force recruiter and they're like, oh, well, we can give you intel, but we can't promise you a language. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work. Like, this is not why I'm joining. I want the Arabic. So I go to the Army And I'm like, I want to join the Army, right? I've graduated from college. I'm, like I could probably go find another job, but I'm going to do this Army thing to set me up for the Foreign Service. And I go to the recruiter, and I'm not even kidding you. The recruiter says to me, I can put you in the Army next week as a bath and laundry specialist. I didn't even know what to say to him. I'm like, I just graduated from college and you want me to do people's laundry? Like, that's not, no. I don't want to join the Army. I want to learn Arabic. I don't care about the Army. Like, I literally had no interest in joining the Army. Mm-hmm. It was all about Arabic. And so it took me about another week or so to finally convince him, like, no, I'm fine. Like, I can wait 6 months to go in if you need me to. So I joined the Army as an Arabic linguist with no intentions of staying in past 4 years. And honestly, even at the 4-year mark, I had no intent to stay past 4 years. And at about 3.5 years, the retention NCO is hitting you up, like, what will do to keep you in? What can I do to keep you in? Nothing. I'm getting out. I'm studying for the Foreign Service exam, moving on with my plan. And kept bothering me. So I'm like, okay, here's what it will take. I'll do the stabilization. I was at the 101st Airborne at the time at Fort Campbell. And this is 99. So like, we're going to JRTC 3 times a year. There's nothing exciting going on, right? Maybe if you're lucky, you get a deployment to like Kosovo. Mm-hmm. And so like, this is what it'll take, because they're never going to give me this, right? I'll do the stabilization option. I'll stay here at the 101st. I'll do the college option, where you get to go do college for a semester. But I'm not going to go to the local college here in Clarksville, Tennessee. I'm going to go to Yarmouk University in Irbid, Jordan, at no expense to me.
How did you come up with that idea?
I just started Googling, like, okay, you know what would be cool? It would be cool to like actually go to the Middle East and mm-hmm. speak Arabic, and like, how could I do this? And again, like, that'll just make me more marketable in the future. She comes back the next day and she's like, okay, the battalion commander said yes. So the Army literally sent me spring semester of 2000. I went to Jordan and I studied at a university, and I traveled all over the country, and they paid my tuition and room and board and per diem and plane tickets, and I still got my E5, not very much pay, but when you're 26 years old, like,
right. And you're living your dream. It was your wish list.
Yeah. Yeah. So I stayed in for that and still planned to get out. And then, of course, 9/11 happened. I had been already talking in the summer of 2001. I started talking to recruiters for a special mission unit. And so I'd put my packet in for that. And then right after 9/11, I wound up doing that and going through assessment and selection and operative training. And I found that I really liked what I was doing, and it was an adventure, and I was doing something that I felt like was really important with really great people. And here I am, 28 years later, epic failure of my 4-year plan, but it's worked out pretty well.
Amazing. For our listeners that are not as familiar with the nomenclature, can you explain what serving in a special mission unit means, just overall what that means?
Yeah, so a special mission unit is there's a couple units within special operations that are special mission units that have very unique mission sets that people are specially assessed, selected, and trained to do, that are doing missions that are military responsibilities, but you're not going to ask the Army to go do it. It's a much more selective, particular mission that those organizations do.
Thank you. So tell us about what you're doing now. What's your current assignment?
Yeah, so
it's a big one.
It is a big one. I am right now serving as the Command Sergeant Major for U.S. Army Special Operations Command. So all of Army SOF under the SOCOM umbrella. And I've been there for almost 15 months now. Not ever where I expected to be. But I was given the opportunity early last year to interview with Lieutenant General Braga to backfill Mike Weimer, who went on to be the Sergeant Major of the Army, and was selected for the job. And so I'm now representing all of the men and women of the Army SOF enterprise.
No big deal.
It's a lot,
Yeah.
but I love it. We have the best people in the world, and that's what really makes the job great, is just the opportunity to make sure that the best people in the world who are doing the hardest things that we could ask our Army to do, that they have all the tools and the support that they need to do that.
Can you tell us the numbers of just how big USASOC is?
USASOC is about 36,000 total people, about 29,000 uniformed service members, and then additional civilians, but about 36,000 worldwide. On any given day, we're in somewhere between 70 and 80 countries around the world.
Amazing. Tell us about, since you've been in this position, some of the big things that you've been working on, or what your big initiatives have been.
It's a very interesting time, I think, for the Army writ large, which certainly trickles down to USASOC. And so there's a lot of change going on. And some of that is viewed as negative change. We are downsizing. We lost about 3,000 billets last year. So that's been a huge focus, just figuring out, where those are going to come from and how we're going to shrink the size of the organization overall without losing any of the capability that we have and our ability to work with partners around the world. But it's also about how we're going to change to meet the requirements, first of 2030, and that's kind of the initial benchmark, but really looking out as far as 2040 and, what do we need to look like as an organization? And so the biggest thing really that we've been dealing with is that transformation. How do we bring in more technology? How do we get better at it? Do we need people who specialize in some of those technological things? And what are they, and how do we train them? Because those things don't exist. A lot of stuff we're doing with things like drones, because you look at the conflict in Ukraine and so much of it is unmanned systems. It's not just people on the front lines now. It's a lot of unmanned systems, a lot of technology. And so just figuring out how do we do all that. And it is changing almost daily. So the ability to keep up with that and how we face that and how we communicate that to the force. Because, of course, anytime you have change, it's uncomfortable. We don't like it. We've gotten really, really good at counterterrorism and counterinsurgency over the last 20 years, and we've been doing it for 20 years. We forget to think about the fact that everybody serving in our formation right now, with the exception of senior leaders, they've come in since 9/11. And so we've gotten just very comfortable and used to a certain mission set and a certain way of fighting. And now as we look at China and Russia, it's not the same. We're not going to be able to fight the same. The skill sets we're going to need are not going to be the same. And so not only figuring out how do we do that transformation, but I think more importantly, where I've really been focused is how do we communicate that to the force?
How do you approach talent management in the position that you're in? Because you are the leader of people, being in the command sergeant major role, and what you do is people all day, every day. So what is your approach from that perspective?
Yeah, that I'll tell you, that's always a huge initiative for me, and I think it is a super important one. I think we often can confuse numbers management and talent management, right? Just putting a person who has a certain skill set in a billet, that's numbers management, right? And anybody can do that. Talent management is getting the right people in the right jobs, whether it's because we need their skills in that job, whether it's because we're putting them in that job so that they are getting the experience they need to go on and to continue to lead at senior levels. And so it is something I spend a lot of time on. And I think there are, when you talk about at the USASOC level, there are two different aspects to that. I mean, some of it is the very much like sergeant major management, particularly the sergeant major management. That's where you need those right people in the right jobs. And it's not necessarily always the best tactician, because the leadership role is different than that tactical role. And so it is some very direct talent management at the sergeant major level to make sure that we're getting the right people in those leadership positions, particularly as we go through challenging changes. But bigger picture talent management, it's everything from recruiting. How do we get people into our formations? How do we communicate with the generation of people who are considering joining the Army or who are already in the Army and considering joining SOF? Because it is not the same as it was in 2000 when I joined, right? Social media didn't exist. And now it's like, if you're not communicating in social media, you're not getting out to the audience. I look at like what Ranger Regiment is doing in the social media space. It's phenomenal. They're doing such a great job of communicating with the generation that they're targeting for recruiting. But we're not as good in all our spaces. General Braga will talk all the time about how, we say we're the quiet professionals, but we've been a little bit too much of the silent professional. And we need to get more out there in the public space and talk about what we're doing and communicating that. So talent management starts at recruiting. And then it moves into retention. How do we keep those people in? And that's everything. Yeah, there's bonuses. And look, I'm a fan of money. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not going to turn it down if you're giving it to me. We are never in the military going to compete with the private sector financially. And so what else are we offering? Are we giving them opportunity? Are we giving them fulfillment? Are we giving them crazy opportunities to go study in Jordan like I asked for, right? One of the main things I always tell soldiers is, if you're looking to re-enlist, like, think about what it is that you want out of your experience in the Army and ask for that. Whether it's a school or a certain job or a certain location, an experience that you want to have, like, ask for those things, because oftentimes we can give those things to soldiers where we're not going to be able to compete financially. And so I'm very involved in the retention space with the Army. I'm also very involved in just the pay space with the Army and having those conversations with the Army and the DoD about how we do pay soldiers, because it isn't comparable with the private sector, but it needs to be enough to live on. And so very involved in those conversations. And I know that doesn't sound like talent management, but there's no talent to manage if we aren't retaining people. And so I see that as really a critical step in talent management. And then it is about looking at what things are we promoting and how are we writing them into our career maps to make sure that we are promoting people who are taking the right jobs, who have the right skills, who are doing the right things. And it's not just about, how fast you can run 2 miles, but really about how well you can lead, how well you can do your job, how well you can do all the things we're going to need you to do in the future. And that changes at every level in your career. The person I promote to staff sergeant first might not be the person I promote to sergeant major first. So really trying to get specific about what things it is that we're looking for at each level of promotion.
Well, that was a fantastic answer. And I love that you looked at it not from the lens of just recruiting, but also retaining, because both are problems right now. Retention and recruitment are both huge issues that the military at large is dealing with. So that's fantastic. What has been a moment in your current position that you're most proud of, whether it be a person or a moment in time with your team that has made you the most proud?
I think it's funny, as the sergeant major, like I find, and I have found this in every job I've done as a sergeant major, the moments that I'm proud of are the moments that the soldiers are proud of, right? Like as a battalion sergeant major, my favorite day every month was the promotion board. Mm-hmm. Because when you see an E4 who you just told earned their first promotion, they got promoted before, but like you just make it to 6 months and you get E2, and you make it to a year and you get E3, right? When you tell a specialist they just earned their first promotion, that pride is the moments that make me proud to be a sergeant major. And so I would say the same in USASOC. I don't think there's any one moment, but it is, when I go out to the units, and I'm on the road probably about 50% of the time, because I am one, I've got commitments to the Army and things I have to do that keep me out of the office, but I also make a very concerted effort to get out to our units as often as possible, because those are the moments that make me proud, when they're able to showcase what they're doing, going down range and meeting with the teams down there and having them show off what they've accomplished in their deployment. Those are the moments that make me proud. It's not, I kind of feel like I don't do anything except enable other people, which I get is not doing anything, but like that's kind of your job as a sergeant major. It's not about any one thing that I can do. It's about that ability to enable so many people that makes me proud.
That's a fantastic answer, and a really great way to look at accomplishments for your team is the moments of accomplishments or wins for other people. We could talk all day about your career and different assignments that you've had, but aside from where you currently are right now, what's been a favorite assignment for you?
So I will tell anybody anytime, battalion CSM I think is the best job in the Army. And it's funny because I loved being an operative, and I think like that's why people come into SOF, is because they want to do the mission. I want to be forward. I want to be killing bad guys. I want, right? And like you get this immediate payoff. And then you hit this point where you get put on a staff. And it's like, oh my God, this is the end of my life, and I'm going to get out of the Army as soon as I hit 20 years because I'm not going to want to do this. And I made a decision when I took my first staff job was as a sergeant major, and right after I got promoted, and I made the decision, like, I've got to find some way. And I did think I was going to retire at 20, but that was still like 4 years in the future. So I'm like, I got to get through this. So how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? I got to figure out some way to make it worthwhile. And so I decided to myself that I was going to focus in my staff job on doing all of the things that I wish someone had done for me while I was downrange. And I suddenly found that that was actually more fulfilling than doing the thing myself. And I'm not sure everyone will have that transformation, but for me, like, when I made that mindset shift, I was so much more fulfilled. And so being a battalion sergeant major to me is the best job, because it's the point at which, like, I knew every soldier in my battalion. I mean, I might not have known everyone's first name, but certainly if I saw one of my soldiers at a PX or something, I knew who they were, right? That's not the case anymore. Like, I don't even know all the USASOC soldiers on Fort Liberty, much less around the world. But even at brigade, like, I had 1,000 people. I didn't know every one of them. And it's awful. I hate that when someone comes up to me and they clearly know who I am and they're talking to me and I'm like, I have no idea who you are. But you can't. Like, it's just not possible. And so battalion is where you still know every one of your soldiers, but you're in a position where you can really do something for them. Like, you've got the position and the rank to be able to have influence to really do important things for them. And so, like, if you're not having fun as a battalion CSM, I don't even know what to tell you, because you're never going to have it better.
Right. How many deployments have you completed in your career?
14.
How many cumulative months do you think that adds up to?
exactly, I don't know. I know that I have 8 combat, like, overseas service bars.
Yeah.
That's not including the 2 years in Korea, but so somewhere just between 4 and 4.5 years.
How has all of that combined time just changed your global outlook and the way that you look at the world around you?
I think it's interesting, and I put this even all the way back to being a linguist and changing the global outlook, because the very process of learning a language to me not only teaches you, like, okay, I know vocabulary in that language, but it gives you what I would say is like a cultural empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the biggest thing that has changed for me, traveling as much as I have, and being in these places and living in foreign countries and interacting with the people, is you develop this cultural empathy of, like, I love being American, right? I mean, I obviously have signed up and defended this country for 28 years. There's no place else I want to live. There's no other country I want to be a citizen of. But I also don't have this expectation that ours is the only right way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think having that cultural empathy and understanding that, like, there are people who just look at the world differently, or they choose to have different habits or different culture or whatever, that's not wrong.
Right.
And being able to see the world that way and understand it, it doesn't, if you want to do my country harm, well, then now you're wrong.
Right.
But if you just want to live peacefully where you live and live your way, then that's okay.
I really like what you said about being aware of the fact that we can coexist differently and just have a different way of life. Do you think that that's influenced the way that you communicate with people that you may disagree with, and just the ability to, like, work through problems with people that are different than you? Because I feel that, especially these days, it's very hard for people to have communication when they know that they fundamentally disagree. Do you think that it's made that easier for you or changed the way that you communicate with people?
I do think it's made it easier. And again, like, am I going to accept 100% of things? No, right? But, like, I don't need to change everybody's mind. I don't need the whole world to agree with me. As long as you're willing to let me live my life, then I think it does change the way. I would tell you even more, though. I think life experience, and that's part of it, has 100% changed the way that I communicate in a very big sense of being in the military. Like, it's like 18% women,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is a male-dominated career field. It's always going to be. I try my best to recruit more women in the military, but I have no expectation we're going to get to 50%. And particularly being in SOF, it is even more so. And especially back in, I came into the SOF enterprise in 2002, and there were even fewer women in SOF then. And I was younger and less experienced and had less, just variety of experiences that taught me that it's okay for people to have different opinions. And I think it was very easy for me to kind of have a chip on my shoulder, right? When people told me, like, when people questioned whether or not I could do something, despite the fact that I had been through the same training as my male counterparts. And, like, if you're not questioning why they can do it, why are you questioning why I can do it? And then I have come to understand that my being defensive about it didn't make the situation any better, because it just creates, right? If I'm defensive, then you're going to become offensive when we disagree on something, right? Or vice versa. If I go on the offense against you because I disagree with you, you're going to go on the defense, and all we're going to do is butt heads, and we're not ever going to even agree to disagree, right? We're just going to be like, oh, I hate that person, this person's stupid, whatever. And I've learned that, like, the word ignorance, we look at it as an insult, but what it really means is that someone is unfamiliar or uneducated on something.
Mm-hmm.
And if I choose to educate instead of attack, the response is so much different.
Mm-hmm.
And even if that person doesn't choose to agree with me at the end of the conversation, at least then they've heard my viewpoint and I've heard theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it has allowed me to influence people more by educating instead of attacking. But the bigger thing it's done is it's just made me a whole lot less miserable.
Right.
Because I just don't get angry about it.
Right. I'm going to pivot a little bit to wellness. And, you know, something I really respect about you and the times I've heard you speak and other podcasts is your transparency with taking care of yourself and different personal things that you've been through. We, you know, sometimes don't get that out of our senior leaders. And it's so important to have those conversations, not at a bird's eye view, talking about people in general, but talking about, hey, this is what I've been through. And, you know, so you've been incredibly busy since 1996, that first enlistment.
Yeah.
And can you tell us about learning over the years through different leadership positions how to take better care of yourself and how to know when you needed to take care of yourself and put other things on the side for a little bit?
Yeah, so I unfortunately learned it the hard way because I didn't take very good care of myself, you know, and I think a lot of military leaders are that way, and definitely in special operations, you know, we're type A personalities. We want to do things, and we think we can do everything. And I did not take very good care of myself, and I found myself in a pretty bad place in 2012, health-wise, stress-wise, all the things. And I honestly, I didn't initially step back. What finally made me step back is I realized, like, my health got so bad that I realized, like, I'm literally taking years off my life, and I need to fix this. And so I decided, like, well, I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to do it at the expense of my career. And I'm just going to, I was a master sergeant at the time. And I'm like, well, I'll just retire as a master sergeant as soon as I hit 20 years. It's still a success. It's fine. At least I won't, like, be literally killing myself. And so, so I started, you know, medical treatment first to get healthy, and then just decided I wasn't going to put myself in that place again. But, and so I started researching things I could do to help take better care of myself, everything from nutrition to sleep habits. Meditation has been a huge one for me that has really been life-changing. And shockingly, I promoted to sergeant major and obviously have made it, you know, all the way to being the USOC CSM. And I have done that while continuing to take good care of myself. And what I would tell anyone is, yeah, you might like, if you find yourself in a bad place, you might have to slow down for a little bit. It might slow you down, but if you can figure it out ahead of time and, like, just stay healthy and take good care of yourself from the get-go, I'm so much more effective. Like, I've continued to progress in my career because I work less, but I work better.
Mm-hmm.
And what it really comes down to is, are you effective or not? Do you get your job done? Do you do it well? And if that means sometimes that you have to take a step back, and you can't always. There are weeks that are just nonstop, and my routine is very much morning. That's the time I have the most control over. I'm up at 4:30. I meditate. I have my coffee while I read. Like, I've got a little bit of time to relax. I get some PT in almost every morning. Even if it's an easier day, I'm still going to do something to just get my body moving and get my blood flowing. Those are the things that for me are now I know, like, I've taken care of myself every day. And I know meditating is huge for me because I know where my brain's at. Some days meditating is awesome. Other days I don't even have a single second that my brain isn't racing. But at least I know at the start of the day, like, that's where I am today.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to be conscious of that. And when I need to take a little bit of downtime, I do. I got sick over in France. I came back with a nasty head cold. I worked from home one day the next week. I still worked. Unfortunately or fortunately, I have full comms in my house. So I worked at home, but I didn't go to work. I stayed in my pajamas. I stayed comfortable. I drank a whole lot of hot tea and honey. And that's okay, because then I came back the next day and I'm like, okay, now I'm good. I got some rest. And I'm ready to jump back in. And that's okay. Instead of just wearing myself down for a week and, performing at 50%, like, yeah, maybe I performed at 50% for a day, but I, came back ready to go. And I think, it's just, you have to, it's okay to take a step back if really what that's doing is allowing you to just be that much more effective.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about getting comfortable with meditation, because I think especially these days, meditation's talked about a lot, but it's actually really difficult in practice. And I like that you said that there are days where it just doesn't work, or it's even 10 seconds that you get where your mind's a little more calm than it normally is. So for someone who is completely unfamiliar with the game,
Yeah.
well, how do you dive into something like that?
So I'll start with this. The thing that I love about meditation is that it's called a practice, not a perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like it never stops being a practice, no matter how long you do it. I have been meditating. I meditate probably at least 350 days a year. It's not perfect. I miss it sometimes when I'm on like a 16-hour flight, whatever. But I probably get 350 days a year. And there are days that it's not perfect. And I've been doing it 7 years. It's still a practice. I still have to practice it. Getting started, though, like the first commitment I made when I was going through all of this and I was trying all of these different things, I promised myself that any habit I decided to try, I would try for 30 days. Mm-hmm. No matter what. Even if I hated it on day 1, I had to come back on day 2. And I had to come back on day 29 and 30. Mm-hmm. If I hated it on day 30, I could stop. If it wasn't having any positive effects for me on day 30, I could stop. Mm-hmm. But I had to do it for 30 days. Mm-hmm. Because it's not going to be great on day 1.
Right.
It's probably going to be horrible on day 1. Like, I literally think I sat there on day 1 counting to myself in my head, like, oh my God, is this over yet?
Yeah. It can feel a little awkward the first time you do it.
I can't sit still.
Yeah.
I used an app. I use Calm. Mm-hmm. I still use it. Mostly now I just do timed meditation. So, and I like either, they have some background noises. I usually use either thunderstorm. I love thunderstorms, or the like babbling brook or whatever they call it. That's just, you can, flowing water. Those are the sounds I like, but they have a whole bunch of different ones if you want to just do that. But I used it because it offers like intro to there's a 7-day intro to Calm. Mm-hmm. And that's what I started with. And then if you do the 7-day one, then they recommend a 21-day intro to Calm, that they start to get a little bit longer. It teaches you kind of more technique for meditation. It gives you different options for different kinds of techniques, which is good. Like some days if I'm feeling kind of out of it, I might do like a body scan to see like what's going on, that I feel like I'm not at 100% today. So there are different techniques, but I highly recommend like use something that is gonna teach you about meditation for the first 30 days or so. Like I said, now I usually just do timed meditation, but I still look at the app every day because they post 2 new meditations every morning that are usually about 10 to 12 minutes long. And I'll look at like what the title of it is, because sometimes I'm like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Mm-hmm. I want to do that one. Mm-hmm. And so then I'll do one of those. And I do timed meditation. I do between 10 and 30 minutes, depending on how much time I have. Weekdays, it's a lot of 10 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Weekends, I try to do more of like the 20 or 30 minutes. But even that 10 minutes, like I said, you'll know in the first 2 minutes, like, oh, I'm all over the place today.
Right. Well, I love that. Those are some good practical tips, because I too struggle with it, but I know, especially this day and age, those moments of quiet, they don't really exist unless you're deliberate about it, because we are bombarded by distraction. We're the distraction generation. Want to pivot a little bit to self-doubt, the topic of self-doubt. And you have been navigating, like you said, male-dominated spaces your whole career, especially that first enlistment. Can you talk to us about dealing with self-doubt and fighting the inner critic in your head? I mean, the title of our podcast is, it's not, goes back to the speech, it's not the critic that counts. And sometimes we think of that as somebody else, but sometimes it can also be coming from our own head. So can you talk to us about your experience with self-doubt?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of us are our own worst enemies.
Mm-hmm.
We tell ourselves, like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not fast enough, or I'm not strong enough, or smart enough, or whatever, and the reality is none of us are until we are, right? And the only way to get there is to do it. And I've dealt with that, my whole career, everything from at the 101st, I competed to be the 101st NCO of the year, and I'm competing against, it was me and a room full of men, and, going to assessment and selection. And especially, like, I'd seen a couple of the men that I worked with at the 101st go, and, like, they came back and they were so beat up. And I'm like, man, these are, like, tough guys that I look up to. And if it, like, beat them up and they had this hard of a time with it, like, I don't think I can do this. And you have to remind yourself that the only way you're going to know if you can do it is to do it. And that does mean you're going to fail sometimes. I have tattooed on my forearm, fall 7, rise 8. And it's my reminder to myself of, like, I'm going to fall. I always have the choice to get back up. And we do learn outside of our comfort zone. And I have, again, realized, and one of the pieces of advice I give to every soldier I talk to is, if you feel comfortable about the next job that you're taking, it's the wrong job. Because you grow by taking a job you don't know how to do. Mm-hmm. I didn't know a year and a half ago how to be the USASOC CSM. Who does? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think now I have it figured out most days. There's always a curveball that, you're going to have to figure that out. But you've got to do the things that scare you. You've got to do the things that are a step further than you've ever been before. You're static. You're just staying the same. You're not getting better. You're not learning. You're never going to find out what you could do until you actually fail. Because then that's your point. That's your limit right now. And then you get better and you come back and that limit's more. It's the same as going to the gym, right? It's just life instead of the gym, right? It's not, your bicep or your squat weight or whatever. It's life. It's how you get better at life is to do it. And, one of the, I don't know if it's a quote or what, but I've seen it on the internet, is the little girl standing at the edge of a cliff, and it's, she says, but what if I fall? And the response is, oh, but what if you fly? Mm-hmm. And you are going to fall sometimes, but you're going to fly sometimes too.
Can you talk about a time that you fell and you learned to get comfortable with falling?
I mean, plenty. I would say the biggest one, honestly, is when, I think when I failed myself and kind of let everything fall apart in my own life. But I mean, even on a daily basis, I mean, like, just recently there was a time that, we were at an event and, I said something. I'm like, man, that's not what I meant to say. Like, that didn't come out how I wanted to, and then, and I mean, like, I'm saying, like, in front of, like, 3 and 4-star generals, and I'm like, well, okay, that's not what I meant. That did not come out the way I wanted it to, I mean, it's little things like that. But then the other option is I just don't speak up, and then I'm not heard. And so, I think there are a million of those. There's been schools I've attempted that I didn't make the first time, and then you learn and you go back and you do it again. Just how you get better. I think it's like a daily, I would say, I don't know, I can't think of a week that's gone by that I haven't had a moment where I'm like, well, that's not what I wanted it to be. But
it's getting comfortable with that
Yeah.
feeling and accepting it. How would you define what you want your legacy to be? Because like we've talked about, you're at year 28,
28.
right? And what do you hope your legacy is when you eventually take off the uniform?
That the people behind me are better than me.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so I'll tell another story. Early in my career, actually, right after 9/11, I had, like I said, I started talking to the Special Mission Unit in the summer of 2001. And then 9/11 happened, and they reached out to me and asked me to move right away, even before I went through assessment and selection, because the 101st was getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan. And I was going to deploy, and if they didn't move me, then I wouldn't be able to go until I came back from that deployment. And I was a squad leader at the time. I just pinned E6, and so I went to talk to the division CSM, who had become a mentor to me, and I was torn because I said, I have this opportunity, and 3 months ago I thought like this was something I really wanted to pursue, but obviously the situation has changed, and we're getting ready to deploy, and my squad's going to go. And if I take this opportunity, they're going to go to combat, they're going to deploy for the first time, and I'm not going to go with them. And I feel like that's a really horrible thing to do as a leader. And I was really like, I'm in the division sergeant major's office, right? And this guy's like probably at like 28 years, infantryman, and like hard as nails. And I'm like, tears running down my face because I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to let my squad go to Afghanistan without me. I don't want to miss this opportunity. And he just kept a totally straight face. And he looked at me and he said, Sergeant, if you've done your job, they don't need you. And I want that to be my legacy, that I've done my job and the Army doesn't need me.
Mic drop. That's a fantastic answer. And I love that conversation early on in your career is now like, it's continuing to influence your legacy decades later. That's awesome.
And that's exactly the point of the story, right? Like,
Right.
This is a man who talked to me 23 years ago. And he is still influencing me, and he is still influencing the soldiers who I work with because of that conversation. And he's long since retired. Like, what a great thing. Like, that's who I want to be.
Right.
Like, I want to be that 20 years from now, there's still a soldier somewhere saying, and like, I'm here, I did something because the sergeant major believed in me.
Well, I have no doubt that will happen. On the topic of legacy, you just returned from France visiting Normandy, and I think on the anniversary of D-Day, and I think what better word than legacy to talk about that experience. So could you share with us what that was like?
It's so powerful, especially, for someone with a career in the military. Like, you look at that generation and think about what they did, and there so many powerful experiences. One, like, the people of Normandy still 80 years later love American soldiers. Like, that's the impact that generation had. And to think that those men who stormed that beach or jumped in the middle of the night, like, they weren't protecting our country. They were protecting freedom, because America wasn't in any immediate danger. We didn't go there to protect the shores of America. We went there to protect an idea. And they died for that. Tens of thousands of people died for that idea. And so to honor that and to have the opportunity, there's so few of those veterans left. But man, when you talk to them, and they don't see themselves as heroes at all, it's just so powerful to hear their story and to hear the respect that they still have for American soldiers serving today. And I feel like anything I've done is so small in comparison to what they did, that it's just an indescribable feeling to be there and to share that and to experience it on, such a big anniversary, and knowing that we are in the last years of having those men with us. And so to be able to hear their stories firsthand is pretty amazing.
Was there a particular moment or interaction you had on that trip that you think will be with you forever?
So this one's a 2-year story. So we went last year as well.
Okay.
And we met a gentleman there at the ceremony at Pointe du Hoc, and had just a really great conversation with him, and his daughter was there with him. And he actually was a sailor. He was at the ceremony at Pointe du Hoc because he served on one of the destroyers that continued, despite being shelled by the German artillery on the shore, continued to just move back and forth across the shoreline, trying to protect the Rangers who were climbing the cliffs. And they lost a lot of sailors that day too. And just had a really great conversation with him, and he was just so vivid. And when we ended the conversation, he made us promise to meet him back there again this year. And so we got to the ceremony at Pointe du Hoc, and I'm going to get emotional. And his daughter found us immediately and came to say that her father wasn't there, that he had passed in the intervening year, but that she wanted us to meet. She came back with his best friend from 1944. They were on the ship together, and they had promised at the 75th anniversary that they would meet again on the 80th. And he had come without his lifelong best friend, and that he had told his friend about meeting us the year before and made him promise to spend time with us. And so just, again, like, it's that sense of, like, these are people who sacrifice so much for freedom, and that they spent the time to think about us. It's just not, it's something I'll never forget.
How could you? Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
What a memory, and what a legacy that generation left, and what a special moment to get to see them again and to know that. Thank you for sharing. I want to talk a little bit about your marriage with your husband.
Yeah.
Because you're both serving at the highest level of leadership in our Army right now. And that is, incredibly rare for two service members to be in a partnership when they have such demanding careers and people that need them every single day. So tell us about what he does and what your dynamic looks like right now as you're both serving in those two positions.
Yeah. So my husband is Command Sergeant Major T.J. Baird, and he is the Command Senior Enlisted Leader at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. And he is coming up on 32 years of service. So, yeah, I think it's, we met in the Army, obviously, and we actually knew each other for almost 8 years before we started dating. And then close to another 4 before we got married. And I think like that's part of it. And I think to have a relationship in the military at all, but certainly at our level, we've actually been geographic bachelors since 2019, sometimes relatively close together. Other 2 years I spent in Korea, and he was on the East Coast of the United States, so not at all close together. I think that it does come back to that. Like, we knew each other for a long time and had very honest conversations about the fact that we both wanted to pursue careers in the military. And I think that is an honest conversation you have to have, because at some point it was fine. We could stay together even when we were both sergeants major. We both went to, it was Fort Hood at the time, Fort Cavazos now. I was a battalion sergeant major and he was a brigade sergeant major. And, a large enough post that we were able to do that and not have any, I was not in his brigade. But there's going to come a point where if you get to a certain level, like there aren't 2 jobs in the same place.
Right.
And so you have to have that honest conversation about, like, are we willing to do what it takes to make this work, even if we have to go to even if we have to go to the opposite sides of the world for 2 years. And, we decided that we were, because what we do is very important to both of us. And I think that, like, you have to be honest about that, because, people always ask me, like, well, why, would you have given it up and followed him if you had to? And no, because I think that the only thing that will absolutely kill a relationship faster than distance is resentment. And if I had felt like I gave up my goals so that he could have his, like, there's no way that doesn't end in some kind of resentment. And that would, just have eaten away at our relationship. And so, and then it comes down to communication on your part. So Korea, amusingly, actually was probably more convenient than, like, Europe, because the time difference is literally, like, opposite. And so when I would wake up in the morning, he'd be, like, getting home from work. And so one of my daily routine things in the morning was I text TJ, and when he gets home from work, when I'm awake, he gives me a call. And then same thing, like, when he's getting up in the morning and walking the dog, he literally would call me as he's walking the dog, and I'm getting home from work and having dinner. And we talk twice most days. Again, not every day. Like, okay, hey, I'm not going to be able to talk to you tomorrow morning because I've got a social event in the evening. So, but most days we talk twice a day. And then, he came over to visit. And every time I came back to the States for work, I would try and, like, add on, a couple of days of leave to spend with him. But you just figure out how you're going to make that communication work. We'd even do, like, virtual dates that, like, we'd agree we're going to watch the same movie on a weekend, and, like, I'd be watching it at, like, 8 in the morning and he's watching it at 6 p.m. or whatever, and we're, like, texting back and forth about, we hit play at the same time and then are texting back and forth about what's going on in the movie. You just figure out, like, how are we going to continue to communicate and have a relationship while we're apart. He is coming up on retirement, so he's decided to hang up the Army uniform, and he'll be retiring early next year and moving on to trophy husband status. So it'll be good.
Yes, I love it. You've referenced him before as your cheerleader, somebody that encourages you to chase your dreams, no matter what that means, even if it means going to Korea and having virtual dates, And I think that's very rare. I think it's kind of a buzzword to say about relationships that, oh, they're my cheerleader, they support me. In practice, it's really hard. It's really, really hard.
Yeah.
I think, especially as a woman, to find that in their partner as they're navigating their career. What advice would you give for listeners of this podcast that are seeking that partnership, and how they can avoid settling for something that's less than that.
I mean, I'll tell you, the first thing is like you just have to be unapologetically you. Like I feel like, and so truth and I was 38 when we got married. Like, because I think partially because I was unapologetically me. Like I wasn't willing to give up anything just to have a marriage, or to have a boyfriend or whatever. Because I knew how I would feel about that. And so I think like that's something that you have to do as a person, certainly as a woman, is like it's too easy to like, well, I'll just make this one compromise for this person. And I'm not saying like you don't compromise on like what you're going to have for dinner on Friday night. Like that, yes, you make those kinds of compromises, right? You make small compromises every day, but like you cannot compromise on who you are. If you want to have a career, have a career. There's someone out there who's okay with that. But when you tell people like, well, I'll consider, not having a career, or I'll consider taking a backseat to your career, or I'll consider moving to Montana. Like, I'm not moving to Montana.
Yeah.
I don't like the cold. Then you find yourself in a situation where you're unhappy. Well, like, you told them you would do it. Like, don't lie to make somebody else happy. Make you happy first.
Who taught you to do that? Do you think you've always been that way, or do you think it was learned?
I mean, my mother would tell you I've been like sharing my opinion with everybody, whether or not they want to listen, since I could speak. So there's a little bit of, I think, natural like hard-headedness. But I think a lot of it is my mom. My mother is a retired 747 pilot. She has been flying since the 1960s. She also, never compromised her career or her principles or who she was. Truth in advertising, my parents are divorced, and I think like that is part of it, is that my mother just wasn't willing to not be who she is, to make somebody else happy, or, to soothe somebody else's ego or whatever. And so, like, I mean, my parents are actually still really good friends. Like, it's not like, it wasn't like a hate thing. It just wasn't, it didn't, work out. But my mother never gave up what she wanted to do. She owned a business. She owned a flight school when I was a little kid, and then got a job with the airlines, and flew all over the world. I mean, she flew Hong Kong turns, and so I think like just seeing that, and it wasn't that my mother ever like sat me down and said, do what you want to do, and like gave me some textbook on anything. It was just her example of being who she was that I think was just really powerful, and, kind of set that idea in my head of like, I'm going to do what I want to do. Like, there's not a list of things I can do and can't do.
That's incredible. And I love that she ran a flight school at some point, right? That's so cool. Did you see her flying a lot when you were growing up? Was it kind of just
I
part of your
literally
childhood?
grew up in airplanes. It's so like, it's great now when everybody else is like puking on like C-130s while we're trying, flying nap of the earth to jump, whatever. I'm just like, whatever. This is nothing compared to a small airplane.
Gave you the iron stomach that you needed for much of your career.
I did not give it to my sister, so I'm even fine with the sympathetic puking because my sister got sick all of the time. Threw up on my Cabbage Patch doll when I was like 6. I mean, like, the things that you remember from childhood, right? But we grew up at the flight school. So I mean, like, because my parents both worked and my mother ran the flight school, so she took us to the flight school, and like we had a sandbox there, and we rode our Hot Wheels on the taxiway, which sounds like it probably was not safe, but we did. We rode our Hot Wheels on the taxiway at the flight school, and different flight instructors would watch us in between instructing if my mom was out instructing. And that's just like totally not normal childhood, but it seemed perfectly normal to me.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. What a memory. Well, I'd be curious. I'm sure your mother is one of them, but who is your woman in the arena? Who is somebody that has inspired you to never lose your voice that you say you've always had and to relentlessly pursue your dreams?
Yeah. I mean, I think number one is 100% my mom. Mm-hmm. I look, though, even at growing up, again, I was very interested in politics, particularly foreign affairs type politics. And so, I really looked at women like Maggie Thatcher, again, dating all the way back to the 80s, and seeing a woman running a country in the 1980s. It can actually be done very successfully. And so, I mean, I think just some of that, but then military-wise, I think, there are some women I really look up to. Sergeant Major Cheryl Lyons, who's retired now, but, she and I served together for a few years, and then obviously she went on to, serve to break glass ceilings and serve as the Command Sergeant Major of U.S. Army Europe, and eventually retired out of NSA Cybercom as a 4-star combatant command Sergeant Major. And then I have this really great group of women officers and enlisted, all fairly senior, who we've just kind of formed this, like we literally have a signal chat group because we're all over the world. But then anytime we're in the same place, we always make a point of seeing each other. That just, we're just there for each other, whatever, because sometimes you have a bad day and you just need to bitch.
Yeah.
And who do you do that to when you're the Command Sergeant Major? There aren't a whole lot of people. And so just having that group, and it's about 10 of us who just have that signal chat there, or the random get-togethers whenever we're in the same place, that I think, that's super critical for me, just having those friends that are in similar places, who kind of understand what you're going through, and who aren't going to judge no matter what you have to say or what kind of mood you're in that day.
Yeah, totally resonate with that. And it sounds like you've got a pretty fierce crew of women in your life that have encouraged you, and that's amazing. I think I take that question with a multifaceted approach too, because there's different people that can influence us from different little spheres in our life. So, well, thank you so much, Sergeant Major Naumann, for your time and just thoughtful answers from all things that you're doing professionally, and then just who you are as a person. It's been so inspiring, and we can't wait for it to reach our listeners. I have no doubt it's going to inspire a lot of people. We do have a little gift for you. These are our Women in the Arena bracelets, and
fantastic!
They have a little excerpt from the Man in the Arena speech, but we've switched it out to Women in the Arena, and so we hope that you can wear it as you navigate the arenas of your life, leading thousands of people, making impactful decisions every single day that are going to shape the future of our Army, and just know that you've got a crew of women here that are cheering you on and are so inspired by you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope that someone listening who's maybe scared to take the next step just jumps.
Absolutely. We believe in here at Iron Butterfly Media the butterfly effect, and the butterfly effect that's born out of storytelling. So I have no doubt that it will. So thank you.
Thank you.
The Women in the Arena podcast is powered by Iron Butterfly Media, a production company committed to honoring the lives of women who have had an unseen and outsized impact on our world. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have a woman who you would like to nominate as a guest, please shoot us a message on our social media platforms. Be sure to subscribe and follow on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. See you next time.